The second half of our talk will focus on spiders and insects, the class Arachnida and the class Insecta. Now, what separates Arachnida from other members of the arthropod group? Well, first of all, a spider has, or arachnid has, 4 pairs of walking legs. I actually have to be careful calling it spiders because tarantulas are also part of this group. So instead of the several legs seen in the crustacea, the Arachnida have 4 pairs of walking legs, and we'll see in just a minute that Insecta have 3 pairs of walking legs. Second, the Arachnida have a cephalothorax instead of a separate head and thorax as seen in the insect. Third, they usually have simple eyes, and there are generally 4 pairs of these simple eyes. Fourth, they have no antennae, so they have no means to take in additional sense information that is found in the crustaceans. And then lastly, they respire through an organ known as book lungs, and we will be going over this again, but you can see right here are the book lungs, and here is the entrance where the air comes into the arachnid. It's called a spiracle. So air enters in through the spiracle, and then the oxygen is extracted in these lungs. Now, this is a land creature, therefore they need lungs rather than gills. The spinning aspect of the arachnid, and in this case I guess I can call it a spider now because tarantulas do not spin webs, are called spinnerets. This is the organ that is responsible for spinning the web, and there are several different kinds of webs that various types of spiders can spin. One is called a sheet web. A sheet web is a single flat sheet of sticky silk that sort of looks like a blanket, and the insects and other foods drop into this web. The second is called an orb web, and this is the one that we generally, our attention is grabbed by because it's a complex web, geometrically complex with concentric circles. And here's a diagram of a orb web, and I'm sure you've seen this out. You can see this concentric circle moving out from the center. Now the spider itself does not necessarily sit in the center. Many times they're off in the corner here. And then the last type is just called a tangled web. A tangled web has no discernible pattern. And here's an example of a tangled web. And basically the prey is captured in this web. The spider comes out and grabs it. Now when we look at the way in which spiders take in oxygen, again, they take in oxygen through an organ called a book lung. And here's the book lung here. Blood flows through this book lung as the air moves on the outside, and you have basically an exchange pocket here with a lot of surface area for oxygen to move into the blood and out of the air, and for carbon dioxide and other waste products to move out of the blood and into the air. So as air flows in, the oxygen is taken out, carbon dioxide is put in, and then the air flows out. And these are designed in such a way as to maximize the surface area for this exchange to occur. Now the slit, as I showed you, it's not really shown very well in this diagram, although it's generally in this area. The slit in the abdomen where the air enters the body is called a spiracle. And it's actually better seen right here. You have the spiracle back here where the air comes in. So that's how the spider breathes. Now, spiders are pretty well known for the fact that they inject venom into their prey and cause problems in that way. And they do that through this little appendage here called a fang, which is very much like a tooth, and it is connected to something called the venom gland. The venom passes down through this and is injected into whatever it bites. And these poison glands make the poison, and they also inject it when the spider bites a prey. Now you'll notice that this is in the front part of the spider, and it's close to where he eats. Food is taken in here through the esophagus and travels back into the stomach area, and it's actually called a sucking stomach because it actually sucks the material up into the stomach. The spider doesn't chew like we think about chewing, and it has to take in liquid material, and it sucks it into the stomach. It then passes down this way and ends up into the intestine here, where the material or food stuff is extracted. And then there are these tubules that inject enzymes in here to help with digestion. And then the food passes on, and whatever's not taken in is then expelled through the anus. And then back here is where the web spinnerets are. And here's the silk gland that makes the silk that the web is made of. And this is where the web is made. There's up in this area, this is the ovary in a female spider that produces eggs. And then here's a receptacle for sperm when the spider mates. Up here is the heart, and the main blood vessel is called the aorta. The eyes are up here, and again, they're simple eyes attached to the brain. And then this spider also has several ganglia like other organisms in this class. Now moving on to insecta. Insecta, as we said before, are distinguished because they have 3 pairs of walking legs instead of 4. They have wings. Generally, many of them have wings throughout their lives, and all of them have wings at some point or some stage in their life. They have 1 pair of antennae. Spiders have none, and the crustaceans have both antennae and antennules. And then as this shows, they have compound eyes as opposed to simple eyes. But they also have 3 segments, a distinct head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Now the wings, there are various different kinds of wings on various different kinds of insects. One type of wing is called a membranous wing. A membranous wing, which I think this is an example of a membranous wing, is thin and transparent, and when you look at it, you can see veins of a web of veins within the wing. Another type of wing is called the scaled wing. A scaled wing has delicate scales that cover the wing. This is commonly seen in insects such as butterflies, and if you squeeze or rub the scales, they will flake off onto your fingers. The third type of wing is a leather wing, and a leather wing is very much part of the exoskeleton, and this is an example up here of a leather wing. This one piece right here is the leather wing part, and then frequently there's another wing underneath. And then lastly is the horny wing, and this is an example of the horny wing, which is much like the leather wing, but then has a membranous wing underneath that is used for the flying. This is the actual flying part, and this is the protection, as it were. And you will probably have seen that this is not a ladybug, but ladybugs are a perfect example of the horny wing, and underneath is the membranous wing that actually allows them to fly. Now, insects don't have book lungs. Insects don't have gills. They have a complex network of tubes or tubules underneath the surface that take in oxygen from the air. So they do take in oxygen from the air, but they do not have a specific organ that processes that oxygen. Now here you see this is a grasshopper actually, and they have a mandible up here that actually moves in two directions, both vertically and horizontally. They take food in through their mouth, moves back through the esophagus and into something called the crop. In between the crop and the intestine is an area called the gastric ceca. The gastric ceca secretes enzymes into this area, which allows for the digestion and breaking down of food into absorbable material. This then passes into the midgut, and then it's absorbed. Whatever can be absorbed is absorbed into the midgut, which then passes into the colon and then out through the anus. Now, in this area is something called the Malpighian tubules. The Malpighian tubules are not part of the digestive system. They're part of the excretory system. And they act very much like the green gland in the previous crustaceans that take waste products out of the blood and secrete those waste products into the environment. Now in an insect, it also has a heart here, and the blood passes from the heart into these areas, and the circulatory system is an open circulatory system that allows blood to pass out. And here you have the various ganglia or nerve cell groups that supply nervous impulses throughout the insect. This diagram shows both an oviduct and a seminal vesicle. So it takes in, when mating, it can take in the sperm and then allows for fertilization of the eggs. Now the interesting part about insects is the fact that they go through a process of metamorphosis. Their reproduction, they have 3 stages of reproduction. This starts with the egg, which is right here. This is what is fertilized and then laid by the insect. When the egg hatches, out comes the larval stage. The larva stage is the stage that emerges from the egg, and it grows to a certain size, and it looks very much like a worm. And at some point, it then encases itself in a chrysalis and enters what's known as the pupa stage. During the pupa stage is when the organism is completely changed and an adult emerges. So there's the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the adult phase. Now what I've just described here is one of 2 types of metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a process where there's a change from pupa to adult, and this change is very dramatic, and in every way the organism is not recognizable. This is what's known as complete metamorphosis. That is when it goes from a completely different larva that looks like a worm into something totally different that looks like a butterfly. Now, incomplete metamorphosis occurs, and it's shown in this diagram, where you have the egg, and the egg hatches and forms what's called a nymph. Now, the nymph looks very much like the adult in many ways, and then all that happens is this nymph gets bigger and bigger until it becomes an adult. And so that's incomplete metamorphosis. The chrysalis, as I said before, is another name for the cocoon in which the pupa enters, and then the complete metamorphosis occurs. And the nymph is the form between egg and adult in incomplete metamorphosis. So I wanted to show this diagram as a review of the anatomy. This kind of diagram could be on a quiz or test. And I want to just go through this again very carefully. Let's start with the the digestive system. You start at the mouth. You have the labrium. The labrium of the two are like the mandibles in the spider, or the mandibles, not in the spider, but in the crustaceans. And they can move both horizontally and vertically. They take in food into the mouth. This passes through the esophagus and into something called the proventriculus crop. The proventriculus crop is the grinding area that grinds this into a smaller and smaller pieces. Then it passes through the gastric ceca. The gastric ceca is the area that makes enzymes that breaks food down more, into the midgut. The midgut is where the food is absorbed into the bloodstream. Then it's passed into the colon and ultimately out through the anus. The nervous system, you have a brain up here with an eye, an associated eye. The many insects have both a compound and a simple eye. Also, from the brain comes several groupings of nerve cells called ganglia, and their names are related to where they are in the body. So this is the subesophageal ganglion because it's under the esophagus. And you have a thoracic ganglion because it's in the thoracic part. And you have the abdominal ganglion because it's in the abdomen. Up here is the ovary, which produces eggs, travels down, and here's a receptacle for the seminal receptacle, and here is where fertilization occurs before the egg is then deposited by the ovipositor. And so this is a brief review, and this ends the second part of the lecture and ends the lectures for today.